If you do not know Hank Thomas, you will have the pleasure of meeting him tonight. Hank Thomas grew up in St. Augustine, Florida, in a loving family, and according to him, of low income. He has since, however, become a wealthy man of influence and power. More importantly, he helped to change America by becoming an important participant in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. As a student at Howard University, which happens to also be my alma mater, in 1960, he became an active co-founder of SNCC, which stands for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. After joining SNCC, he also became part of CORE, which means the Congress of Racial Equality, in 1961. The December 5th, 1960 United States Supreme Court decision in the Boynton versus Virginia case was a victory for the desegregation of facilities in interstate transportation. It was one thing for the court to strike down laws that required segregated facilities in interstate transportation, but quite another thing to enforce that decision against segregation in facilities related to interstate transportation. This was the task of the Freedom Ride of 1961, to enforce the Supreme Court decision against segregation. The Freedom Ride of 1961 was sponsored by CORE, and the ride took place in May of 1961. The destination was from Washington, D.C. to Louisiana. They didn't make it right away. It took a while. One of the original 13 Freedom Riders was Mr. Hank Thomas, a Howard University student in 1961. Serious threats on their lives occurred once they reached the border of Alabama, where a mob was waiting for them at the bus station in Anniston. The tires of the Greyhound bus on which Mr. Hank Thomas was a passenger were slashed, and windows were broken. Out of fear for their lives, the passengers did not leave the bus. The driver drove out of the station, and a mob followed the bus. The slashed tires of the Greyhound bus caused the bus to stop shortly after leaving Anniston. The mob attacked when the bus stopped. A bomb was thrown into the bus, and the passengers were forced to break out the doors of the bus to escape with their lives. This incident did not stop the ride. It was resumed, and Hank Thomas again placed his life in danger for freedom. He was jailed at Parchman Prison in Mississippi, one of the worst jails in the country. In the end, Thomas and the Freedom Riders prevailed. Facilities and bus stations, train stations were desegregated. The contributions of Hank Thomas to making the United States a nation of justice and equality did not end with the Freedom Ride of 1961. He continued his work in Mississippi during what is now called Freedom Summer of 1964, a project to get Black Americans registered to vote. In 1965, he began his work to help the people of Vietnam by becoming a medic in the Vietnam War. He was wounded in 1966, and he later received the Purple Heart and other military awards. After his service in the United States military, Hank Thomas continued to fight for liberty and the pursuit of happiness in the United States for all people. He achieved much of this for others as well as for himself. He is the operator and owner of hotels and restaurants in Atlanta, Georgia. He has owned franchises and operated businesses such as the Marriott, Fairfield, the McDonald's, the Dairy Queen, Burger King, Wishbone Fried Chicken, and coin-operated laundromat, to name a few of his businesses that have made him rich. He continues to serve his community by serving on boards of trustees, such as Tougaloo College, Morehouse School of Medicine, Talladega College, Aplex Museum, the Butler Street YWCA, the Atlanta Youth Academy, and the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Atlanta. These are just a few. He has also established scholarships, funds for many schools and colleges, too many to name. Mr. Thomas is a well-known and sought-after speaker. He has appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and you know you're great if you appear on the Oprah Winfrey Show. His voice is used in Lee Daniels' The Butler, and if you've ever seen that film, you probably would not have recognized his voice. I saw the film, and I did not recognize his voice. And he appeared on the CNN special, The 60s. These are just a few of the shows. It is indeed a great honor to have Mr. Thomas with us this evening, and it is my great privilege to introduce him to you. Please welcome Mr. Hank Thomas.
Dr. King, life is you and me. Says I, but Dr. King, you're many years dead. I never died, said he. I never died, said he. Oh, that evil man, he shot you. He killed you, said I. To take more than bullets to kill a dream, says Dr. King. I didn't die, says Dr. King, I didn't die. And standing there before me and smiling with his eyes, says Dr. King, what they can never kill will go on to organize. We'll go on to organize from Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, and South Carolina too, where black folks defend their rights. It's there I'll be with you. It's there I will be with you. Good evening. Dr. Drinkard, thank you very much for that very kind and gracious introduction. But I want to introduce someone to you who is greater than myself. For 42 years, this lady has played the music that makes me dance. My wife, Yvonne. The first time I saw her, she was working as a bank manager, and I just knew I had to meet this lovely lady. So I remember the way I taught Barry White how to say this. So I went over and I said, my name is Hank Thomas, and I want you. And then I said, oh, baby. And her eyes got real wide, and I could tell that she was very excited. And she said, security! Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I've been to the mountaintop, and I've seen the promised land. My name is Hank Thomas, and I am a freedom fighter. I fought for the liberties of my people residing in these United States of America. And I fought for the right to be called a man. This year is the 50th anniversary of the 1964 Civil Rights Bill, and it causes me tonight to review more of our history and how we all came to be here in this room at this place today. The Civil Rights Movement changed America. It opened up freedom waves for all people, the disenfranchised. By pushing on the gates of freedom and on the race issue, the movement liberated all peoples crossing racial, sexual, and gender lines. Dr. Martin Luther King said it best when he stated that the movement proved that the race issue is both at the heart of the promise and the problem of the United States. I'm one of the 13 original freedom riders, as Dr. Drinkard has stated. And various events of late, verdicts in recent trials, laws limiting voter rights, immigration reform rhetorics, workers' rights issues, and a more aggressive KKK recruitment reaffirms for all of us that there's still yet work to be done. The struggle for all men and women to exercise inherent rights guaranteed by the Constitution and stated in the Declaration of Independence, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, regardless of race, sex, or sexual preference. The absence of living in fear or of being misunderstood or mislabeled. The right to dare to wear a hoodie or to listen to loud rap music without being labeled a gangster and be killed because somebody thought you had a gun. The struggle of diverse people for full citizenship and full equal treatment, sometimes sadly in some parts of our country, remains an elusive dream. Sadder still is knowing that the fight for freedom has neither a beginning or an end, that it is as much an evolution as it is a revolution. The Civil Rights Movement brought about changes of many unjust laws in this country. Yesterday, Mississippi Freedom Summer, where a total of 20 young blacks were murdered in the state of Mississippi. We know about the 3 that were murdered, but a total of 20 that particular summer were murdered as they sought the right to register to vote. And today, 1964, it was the Southern Democrat Party, through violence and murder, sought to keep blacks away from the polls. Today, it is not the Southern Democrat Party, but the Republican Party in various states are trying to keep blacks and minorities away from the polls again, and they call it voter suppression. That is our new rallying cry. Now, a casual glance at my rap sheet of 22 arrests, somebody could easily conclude that perhaps I'm a career criminal. Well, to the dismay of my mother, I am. I was a criminal charged with treason against the state of Mississippi. I was an outlaw charged in Alabama for being an outside agitator and trying to stir up the Negroes. I was a catalyst for social change. I knew that the gains won on the battlefield can also be fleeting. That is to say that freedoms easily won can be lost, and that each generation must continue the fight or we will lose that which we have gained. You've got to keep fighting voter suppression. I'm in my 73rd year, and I'm proud of the role that my generation played in bringing about change in America, especially discharging a lot of bad laws, unjust laws, the unjust laws of segregation and discrimination. The stand your ground laws are bad laws, and they must be overturned. And just as my generation challenged the bad laws, you must challenge these laws. I am also a Buffalo soldier. I served with valor in the Vietnam conflict, and I earned the Purple Heart for wounds sustained there. I fought for the rights and liberties of the Vietnamese while I did not enjoy those same rights and freedoms back here at home. My father was a Marine in World War II. And when he came back home to Georgia, Jefferson County, he proudly put on his Marine uniform with a chest full of medals, and he went down the register to vote. And when the man said, "We ain't letting no colored people vote," he pointed to the medals on his chest, and the man said, "I don't care if you killed Tojo. Ain't no niggas gonna vote in this county as long as I'm alive." I am the history of my people. In 1864, when the ex-slave laborers who made up the 54th Massachusetts Colored Regiment, and it made its famous charge at Fort Wagner, South Carolina, I was there. In my heart and my soul, I'm a member of the Massachusetts 54th Regiment. In 1943, the Tuskegee Airmen, flying protective cover for U.S. bombers, never lost a bomber to German fighters. I am a Tuskegee Airman. I was there. When the all-black 761st Tank Battalion, attached to General Patton, his lead battalion that led his way into Germany, I was there. When the 92nd Infantry in Italy, the Buffalo Soldiers, they who produced 4 Medal of Honor winners, I was there. I am a Buffalo soldier. I am a part of my people's history. I'm a part of their pain and their joy. And so years later, when I boarded that Greyhound bus like the descendants of that 54th Massachusetts Regiment, when I boarded that bus, I was fighting for the freedom and the liberation of my people. I could not vote, be served in a restaurant, or rent a hotel room in my hometown or anywhere throughout the South. However, like my father and his father before him, when I received my draft notice, I answered my country's call. I left both blood and tears on the ground in Vietnam. The blood was mine, and the tears were for my 3 young medics who were killed, 18 and 19, and the 2 18-year-olds were killed on the same day. But that was then, and this is now. The world has turned over many times in my 73 years, and I've traveled the world far and wide. The country has changed. My, how it has changed. Today I am very proud to be an American, but I have never been prouder of my country than that night in 2008. I spent the first 20 years of my life living under American apartheid, the segregation system. But let me say to you, with all of the pride and the poetry, stony the road we have trod. Bitter has been that chastening rod, and it was felt in the days when hope unborn had died. But with a steady beat, did not our weary feet take us to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, where Barack and Michelle Obama doth reside. Now, I ain't no preaching. I didn't come here to preach, but I need somebody to say amen. When John Kennedy was elected president, the Irish and the Catholic rejoiced, and they should, and they were proud. When a woman is elected president of these United States, women should rejoice and be proud and be glad. And one day in the future, a Jew or a Hispanic will be the president of the United States. And when that day happens, I pray that no one will question their citizenship or their religion, or ask to see their birth certificate, or intimate that they were born somewhere else like Tel Aviv or Mexico City. Are you listening, Donald Trump? In my lifetime, I have voted for Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Reagan. I voted for President Carter. I voted for Bush 1 and 2 and President Clinton. But I am proudest to have voted for Barack Hussein Obama, a man who looks like me. I am proud that my country elected a man of diverse parentage to be the president of these United States. And since that election in November 2008, I can truly sing America the Beautiful. Since that November night, I can truly sing with America, my country, tears of thee. And yes, since that day, I can say now, I too am proud of my country. Now, some say that President Obama is a polarizing figure. Polarizing? Throughout the history of this country, anytime an African American moves into an area that has been previously reserved for white, it is said that we polarize. And indeed, I would imagine that the first African American students on this campus might have been accused of polarizing the student body. 1928, Cadet B.O. Davis enters West Point, the first black at West Point in the 20th century. The majority race of the cadets there vowed to a man, do not speak to him during the entire time he was on the campus at the academy. And to a man, they kept their pledge. 1942, General Davis becomes commander of the famed Tuskegee Airmen. He rose above the treatment he received from his fellow Americans, but he was a polarizing figure. 1947, Jackie Robinson integrates Major League Baseball, and he catches hell from all of the white players. They cheered for his failure. They cheered for his failure. Does that sound familiar? It seems that it wasn't Jackie's color that made him unpopular. He was simply a polarizing figure. 1948, President Truman signs the executive order integrating the armed forces. And for the first time ever, black and white military men and women of same rank received the same pay. It was unprecedented, but many folks in this country, especially Southern congressmen, said it was a polarizing act. 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, stating that we must have equality of educational opportunities. That, they said, polarized the South. 1956, the Montgomery Bus Boycott was a seminal event in the civil rights movement. The segregation policies and the public transportation of Montgomery were changed, and with it, Rosa Parks became a polarizing figure. 1957, desegregation of public schools, where 6-year-old black kids down in Louisiana and across the South became polarizing individuals. 1960, Greensboro, North Carolina, A&T College. 4 freshmen sat down at a Woolworth lunch counter and began to change this country, but they polarized a lot of the citizens. 1961, 13 of us boarded a Greyhound bus heading south, blacks and whites sitting together. The 1961 Freedom Rides were a turning point in the fight against mandated state racism. The fight, our fight for civil rights, was led by an integrated army. It was clearly a polarizing act to change the segregated laws of the South. 1964, Mississippi Freedom Summer. 90% of blacks of voting age were not allowed to vote in Mississippi. Hundreds of students, blacks and whites from the North, Midwest, traveled Mississippi to register black folks to vote. And during that summer, as stated previously, many were murdered. But the citizens of Mississippi simply said that these people coming down here to try to register black folks to vote were polarizing the white citizens of Mississippi. 1965, Selma to Montgomery march via the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Congressman John Lewis and hundreds of others were beaten by horse-mounted state troopers as they attempted to cross their bridge on their way to Montgomery. 43 years later, waiting to greet them at the bridge on the other side is the President of the United States, President Obama. Without a doubt, that president polarized. Let me apologize to you lest I sound a bit jingoistic. Today, you and I live in a wonderful country. The actions, or better yet, the failure of the actions of Congress notwithstanding. My experience in the civil rights movement left me with a great resolve. I heeded the mantra of the military recruiters to be the best that I can be. And though I was born in poverty, I never believed that I was destined to remain poor. Yes, I grew up without a lot, but never let that define me. Never let that define me by those labels. I never owned poverty, and it did not define who I was. Yes, as the world turns, all is not well in America, for these are the best of times for some, and the worst of times for a few others. Today, 50 years after the great civil rights and human rights movement, hundreds and hundreds of diverse elected officials later, some in our community still remain in crisis, and the political system alone will not save them. We, all of us, you and me, have got to figure out some way to be a part of that solution. Well, there are two Americas. In one America, the stock market is past 17,000. The automobile industry that was near collapse a few years ago are now more profitable than ever. Job creations in the past 4 years have exceeded that in the past 10 years, and home ownership of people of color, the mortgage crisis notwithstanding, is higher than it has ever been. However, in the other America, children go to bed undernourished. High school dropout rates are escalating for people of color. And the young males populate our jails and prisons. And many in the working class have lost their homes, and some have lost hope. And the income gap between the haves and the have-nots is getting wider. I think you will agree with me that we can say, America, we are better than this. Today, the world over, people understand that the USA is the land of opportunity. Get to the USA and your dreams will come true. That is the mantra of the immigrant. We live in a country that was built and continue to be propelled by the energy and talents of our first and second generation of immigrants. And through many dangers, toil, and snares, I have already come. And like the immigrants from the West Indies and Africa, I have come to the new America, and I have made my dreams come true. So I say to you, young people, what about you? Whether you're from Asia, Europe, the South America, or Africa, people risk their lives to get here. You are already here. We have a charge to keep, a God to glorify. We must protect the rights of all people of color, women, all people of diverse sexual orientation or religion. In the words of Dr. King, now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children, or it would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment to serve the present age. Mother's Day, 1961. will live in infamy in my mind. 7 black and white Freedom Riders, along with 11 other unsuspecting passengers, were almost murdered by the terrorist KKK. Just days before that, I was arrested in Winnsboro, South Carolina, taken to jail, kept in jail for several hours with no one saying anything to me. So when I asked the jailers what was my charge and why was I arrested, and if they weren't going to charge me, please let me out so I can go. After several hours, they came to get me. 3 police officers put me in a squad car, and I asked where were they going, or where were they taking me. They said, you said you wanted to leave, so we're going to take you to the bus stop. When we turned the corner to the bus station, all of the lights in the station were out, and maybe a crowd of about 25 men had gathered. And when they saw the police car coming, they started to cheer. Police car stopped a couple of blocks away, and the man beside me, the police officer beside me, and said, you wanted to go? Well, get out. You can go. I said, the bus station is closed, and I don't know when the next bus is coming, and those men don't look too friendly. He put his hand on his gun and said, nigga, get out of this car, I'll blow your brains out. So I had to make a quick decision. As I got out, the police burned rubber taken off, and the mob started to run toward me. Well, I was in pretty good athletic shape, so I believed that I could outrun them, but where was I going to run to? So I started running. And in the next few seconds, it appears, car drove up beside me. A black man was in it. He said, son, jump in this car and get on the floor and don't look up. I jumped in, and that's how I escaped from Winnsboro, South Carolina. I rejoined the group in Atlanta, Georgia, as we prepared to go into Anniston, Alabama. Congressman Lewis and Jim Peck had already been severely beaten in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and they were unable to continue on the ride. Dr. King and other veterans of the civil rights movement tried to dissuade us from continuing the ride. But we were dreamers, and we were daring. So we rode into the eye of the tiger in Anniston, Alabama. When we got to the bus station, 35 or 40 men were there. And they started attacking the bus, breaking out the windows and rocking the bus. The bus driver, fearing for his life, jumped out and said, boys, I just drove the bus here. And he did lock the door so the mob could not get in, and they continued to break out all of the windows. Unbeknownst to us, they had also cut the bus tires. And after what seems like forever, another driver was found, and he got aboard and tried to drive away. We only got a short distance when the tires went flat. Went flat in front of a crowd that looked like they had just come back from church. And they started to attack the bus again. This bus driver also got off the bus, and he locked the door. And when they found out that they could not get aboard, that's when they set the bus afire. And as they set the bus afire and the bus is burning profusely, I, like all of the others, had to make a quick decision. I thought I was going to die. I knew if I got off that bus, I'd be beaten to death. I knew if I stayed on the bus, I was going to be burned. So I had to make a decision how I was going to die. I'm 19 years old, and I'm being forced to make the decision on how I was going to die. I thought that if I took a deep breath of that toxic smoke, it would put me to sleep, and that's the way I was going to die. Folks, I'm telling you, for all practical purposes, I had decided to commit suicide. So when you get that toxic smoke inside of you, regardless of what you think you were going to do, you get up and you fight for air. And as I rushed to the front of the bus, I'm a pretty big fella, and I'm trying to get the door open. 3 or 4 men outside were holding the bus. And they said, let's burn these niggas alive. Let's burn these niggas alive. There were a total of 20 of us on the bus. 7 of us were Freedom Riders. That mob was going to kill us all. And what was our crime? We dared to sit in the front of the bus. Through a miracle, the fire reached the fuel tank. And when it did, it blew out the back of the bus. And the men holding the bus then ran for cover also. And that was the way we were able to get off of that bus. As I stumbled off the bus, a man hit me with a baseball bat. And when we were finally all off the bus, and the bus is fully inflamed by now, fire department had been called, and when the firemen got there, and when you have smoke in your lungs, you need air, you need oxygen. The fireman would not give any oxygen to us. He was going to give it to the white Freedom Riders, and there's a picture of me and Ed on the ground, and he handed his oxygen mask to me, and the fireman is saying, you can't do that. Finally, Bobby Kennedy prevailed upon Governor John Patterson to give us protection to the hospital. We got to the hospital and we encountered the same thing. You blacks have got to go around the other side of the building to the colored emergency room. They would not treat us. And the white Freedom Riders said, if you don't treat them, then don't treat us either. Once again, Washington prevailed. And then the mobs told the hospital, send us out. We were not going to go. And then they said, you either send out the Freedom Riders or we're going to burn down this hospital. These were men who had just come from church. Again, Washington prevailed. And finally, Fred Shuttlesworth, with an escort from the Alabama State Patrol, was able to come to Anniston to rescue us. And that's how we got out of Anniston. Of the Freedom Riders totally, from May through September, there were a total of 426 Freedom Riders. The youngest was 13. Young man teenager from Jackson, Mississippi, was also sent to prison. The oldest was Alex Weiss, a Holocaust survivor. He was 61. Our most steadfast allies in our fight for freedom were American Jews. Lest I forget the old Jerusalem. But they were also whites of goodwill. Ours was an integrated fight. To the righteous white people and to the soulful Jews, to them, to you, I am forever grateful. When I boarded that bus 50 years ago, I was in search of the American dream. My elusive American dream, the dream that states that I should and I do have the right to expect equal treatment with dignity and respect. But that dream of old, it has not been tarnished. And today, it has lost neither tone nor tint. And it still stands a glimmering through the veils of yesterday. That dream still waxes a wondrous beauty, one that has been coaxed by smiles and watered by the tears of joy and triumph. Of the 7 Freedom Riders on that bus that was set afire by the Klan, I'm the only one still alive. I have attended far too many funerals, and I've raised my glass to the memories of my friends. But memories of them are all that I have left now. And memories, they don't leave like people do. They always stay with you. And it is sometimes in the evening of my memories, I will go and visit some familiar places. Anniston, Birmingham, Montgomery, Selma, St. Augustine, and Jackson. And sometimes if I listen vainly, I can hear some of those old familiar songs, the music of my youth, the old freedom songs. I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep your eyes on the prize. And some of the songs, the song that has become an anthem of oppressed peoples everywhere, we shall overcome. Indeed, in 1961, I was in the springtime of my life. My music was still in me, and my song was yet to be sung. For yesterday, I was young, and the taste of life was as sweet as honey on my tongue. Today I stand before you a man in full, a man that is deep in the autumn of his years. And today my steps are slowed, and they are illuminated by a diminishing light of an approaching sunset. Well, I know that my twilight is here. I see the lengthening of my evening shadows, the thousand dreams I dream, the splendid things I have planned. In my life, I've run so fast that youth and time is running out. So I say to those of you here, when it comes time that I must meet my day, and I must cross that river and go dance with my ancestors of the Middle Passage, when I am summoned to come before the village elders to give accounts of my time here on earth, I shall recite 2 Timothy. I fought the good fight. I completed my course, and I kept the faith. And when they ask me, why is it that I was arrested 22 times? What was it that I did that caused the state of Mississippi to put me on death row? I'll simply say to them, I saw something wrong, and I done something about it. Thank you.